Hi, I'm Cynthia Consentino. I live in Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts. I'm a sculptor. I teach at UMass Amherst ceramics. My process, always story. Story is what interests me. I use my art as a means of understanding things I don't understand or things that bother me or things that I find particularly potent, like, or meaty, like they have many layers. There's a lot of contradictions, say, in our stories. Blame it all on my family. They were complicated. I started in 2D. I think most of us do, right? What's available at schools. But I did take some clay work in high school. And I remember playing in mud, really going into the zone at like age 5, a mound of mud and just like going up, working that mud cake, for hours. It felt like I think it's important to do both. I love that I could do a lot of doodles, and then those doodles end up being sculptures sometimes. I love that I could do hundreds and hundreds of doodles or little quick, nasty drawings, I call them, like not worried about the quality of the drawing, but just draw what you feel without editing. Whereas sculpture, right? It's harder to do that because it's in the round, it exists in space. So there's structure issues and it's harder to be spontaneous with the sculpture for me. So the drawing is a vehicle to get all those things out that I'd never get to in sculpture. But sometimes then from one sculpture, I'll do another one. Really depends on the piece. And sometimes I do elaborate drawings, like if it's a slab constructed piece. So I'll literally do a template drawing so that I cut out this piece and this piece and this piece. I've been trying to put a group of sculptures together that are all interacting, but it takes a while to build up enough work to do that. And sometimes I'm doing a drawing just because I want to do a complete piece in like 10 hours or something versus a month for a sculpture. Early work was looking at my own family background and trying to make sense of 3 generations' values living in one household. Conflict. Values of, say, my grandmother was born in 1900, Sicily, very strict Italian. And then my mother growing up in the 30s and 40s, her values, right? Like I always say house beautiful for my mother, like the 50s housewife, right? But conflicting with her own inner desires for more. And then my growing up in the 70s, right? So looking at people and trying to understand all the layers of cultural influences and conflicts they're dealing with. And so then my sculptures are trying to make sense out of it. And then I moved into body of work that was looking at fairy tale and mythology, Western civilization, like Romulus and Remus, and then Little Red Riding Hood, and like looking at how story influences us. And sort of fairy tale and mythology is just loaded, right? There's layers of meaning and they're trying to give you cultural rules. When I sculpt something, I am referring to those layers. And that's why we find stories so important, is that they're trying to reveal. They might try to teach you something and codify what the values are, right? But they also show the contradictions and the complexity of life to try to get at the greater meanings of like why we are here, what we're doing, what's important, what's valued, how you should behave, right? What sparks my subversion is the injustices and the ridiculousness of a lot of assumptions, or how culture just sort of bombards you with how you should be. I never have been easy with my role as a good girl. I was supposed to be 100% for the family. Like you serve the family. Family is everything. You sacrifice. I was told a lot that I was selfish because I had desires. I don't think my brother was told that. So there was a great inequities in my household, but yet there was a power play where like the matriarch, my grandmother, was like the dominant one. There was a conflict between my grandmother and her son-in-law, my father, for power. But there's so many contradictions in gender roles. So it's not only woman, but how we look at nature, how we think what is valuable. Because a body of my work was about, looked at the tchotchke, what is valued in art. Craziness of values is shown about gender is very much paralleled in art, right? So like clay is less valued because it's associated with children and the domestic world, dinnerware and stuff like that. Art can reflect in many ways how we value things. Is just taught. It's not intrinsic. I think that's how I started, or like exquisite corpse work, or the rabbit girls, the hybrid people. These are older works. I think I definitely was a collagist, or I call it mix up. Take one thing and put it in a place where it doesn't belong. And by doing that, you are able to look at things more clearly, where you put two things together that are not associated. So the clearest example would be the Little Red Riding Hood piece, where she becomes perfect little girl dress, like a 7-year-old or something, and then she has a wolf head. So she becomes the aggressor. She becomes the one that's empowered to find her destiny, right? Which is to defend herself. And so that's true about the little girls with guns, because we're not supposed to see little girls with guns, because it makes you think, like, why is that happening? I did want to say, is this a nightmare? It is a critique of our gun culture too, even though it was like both. It was like a fantasy, like, let's show images of girls being powerful, but no, we don't want them to be carrying guns. I'm always interested in male female relationships, but also I am going to do some that are woman and woman. And I have made some little mock-ups of ones, which is interesting being a lesbian, right? That I'm doing male, females, but they do look androgynous. I definitely am interested in androgyny and gay issues, or transgender. It's definitely about relationships. I wanted them to be ambiguous. Are they loving each other or fighting each other? The other thing that was happening in these pieces was a play with 2D, 3D. But so if you look at them like from the side, they're very narrow. And how I made them was I started with a flat slab and sculpted a little bit of relief on one side, flipped them over and did a little relief, and then I joined them together. So it's like if you were cutting out pieces of wood and joining them all, but in carving them away a little, but I was adding a little. Definitely the terracotta refers back to the whole history of terracotta and art, kind of cubist. The vase ones, these are two vases, so they come apart and you can use them as a vase. So I like that idea. Oh, the owner of them could play with how they are set up and utilized or not utilized. But it's certainly the same thing. It's about relationships, but in this case, in balance, right, within a relationship. They fit together. Could it be a little oppressive? They don't have their whole bodies. They're a little bit dark, but also playful. And this is pretty much the same male female relationships, the inner child, or how we present ourselves in the world, how we feel inside. They're both holding their body parts. The little people inside, like he's covering his penis and she's kind of covering her breast and her pubic area. So there's that inner vulnerable self, and then there's the outer self that is showing themselves stronger, but maybe this is how they feel inside. This is my Cronach, Adam and Eve. And it's like, what was Cronach trying to say? I mean, we know like Eve is supposed to be the one who lured him into sin. Of course, I've read a fair amount of feminist evaluations of mythology and Christianity. Decided I would do a bunch of series of Madonna's dealing with different aspects of her. She has a vase head, so woman as womb. The two that are more referencing animism or cultures that have goddesses that are half bird, woman. Rabbits are very mystical too in different cultures. They mean different things. Female as passive or as prey, pulling in some of the other religions, Egyptian bird goddesses. And then here, literally, Mary is sort of broadened to be representing all three major religions of Judeo-Christian, India, Hindu, Islamic. The burqa woman is really like a lament as well, how disempowered or brutalized a lot of women are in all cultures. So it's giving them power, but also critiquing in different ways. So the very first upside down person I did was a portrait of my father, and it's called the Hierophant, or, the ruler, the priest. For me, the upside down is like that things aren't right. Maybe we are born upright, but then over life, we get turned upside down. And let me say the Hierophant definitely gets its name and its upside down aspect from doing the tarot cards. I still look at the tarot cards every so often when I feel the need. So when it's upside down, that the energy is inverted or not coming through, like we're blocking it, too much forcing a situation or not accepting things, but also just a intuitive kind of thing of things aren't the way they're supposed to be. First one, when I did the Hierophant, it was like the absurdity. I had my poor father, I put him in his BVDs and his face is turning blue. It was perhaps a bit critical, but it was a compassionate portrait of him. Here's the feminist. I do feel compassion for how oppressed men are as well, right? That they have to provide for the family and they're not supposed to do what they want. He had to deal with to make it for the family. They put the money so he could go to college. There was pressure that he would make a lot of money and take care of his parents. Like 20 something years later, I went back to the upside down, and it was a portrait of a mother, daughter, and dog, and they're all upside down. Some level, it's still me and my mother, but it's really just people. The daughter has flowers growing out of her skirt, and the mother has an ocean scene with like whales. So now they're upside down, things aren't right. And it's more about the turmoil and the conflict we all feel about how the world is falling apart. Whales are in trouble, the ocean is in trouble, the coral is in trouble, climate change. So this is an example of, so on one level, it's me and my mother. On another level, it's Mother Nature, say Demeter and Persephone. She's nurturing, but she's also incapable. So is it Mother Nature? Or is it like all of us, how with this dilemma of how we deal with the world being in such a precarious place? And there's another level of this too, because the water to me is always symbolic in Western culture of sexuality and the subconscious. You know, it's a little wicked, like that the water is in her pubic area, also an element of her own sexuality and how she feels about it. So then the little girl has the flowers. And it's like, not like I understand all of it. This is where it's very much about story and mythology, where there's layers, and why I feel compelled to sculpt. I don't totally understand it. I see conflicts. Innocence is always what I think of, but little girls. The flowers can represent innocence, daisies. But again, it's in her sexual area, like under her skirt. We're not supposed to look there. So I did the girl and I did the mother, and I said, well, they need another being here. This body of work is starting to be more about nature versus human relationship. It's about how we domesticated or altered nature and how the world is topsy-turvy as a result. I've always used animal as symbolic or stand-ins or metaphor for aggression or prey or innocence, or like, so the wolf and the rabbit. The squirrel piece, the grenade left over, is he gonna get hurt by the grenade, or is he gonna throw the grenade? It's all this idea of wanting a desire for nature to be able to hold its own. It's really like my desires or concern for the environment. So she's holding mountains and streams, and to me, like, that's like pure nature, like clean, beautiful water that's coming right off the mountain before it gets polluted. So she's nurturing it. Is she Mother Nature? Is she man? Symbolic of just humans who love nature and want to hold nature, protect nature. It's also a lament. It's about what's happening with our planet. It's symbolic of how do we restore or pay back to nature how much we've devastated it. So I think a lot of artists are interested in transformation and healing, right? They first for yourself. My artwork is to heal and make sense of my own family upbringing, the world, being a woman in this culture, which is still a problem. I do think art has the potential to really heal people.